Welcome to Wadi El Gemal National Park. To get a better understanding of the area you're visiting, we'd like to introduce you to the National Park, its ecological diversity, geological history, and its ancient inhabitants whose livelihoods depend entirely on the environment in which they live. Millions of years ago, all the continents of today's Earth were joined together in one enormous landmass called Pangaea. Over the millennia, this landmass split apart in a process scientists call the continental drift. This drift unleashed tremendous geological forces, causing the depressions, elevations, rifts and collisions that created the continents, mountains and seas of our world today. The most recent rift took place approximately 30 million years ago and created the Red Sea between the Arabian and African plates. The Red Sea is part of a zone of depressions and faults called the Great Rift Valley, which stretches from Lebanon to Mozambique. The Red Sea divides Asia from Africa. It begins from the Galala Plateau near Suez and extends as far south as Eritrea on the African side, and from Jordan's Gulf of Aqaba to Yemen's Mandeb Strait on the Asian side. Tectonic plate shifts push the Earth's crust upwards several times to form the Red Sea Mountains in the Eastern Desert. The most recent shift occurred about 25 million years ago and pushed the Eastern Desert to its highest elevation. These upward tectonic movements form the Red Sea Mountains, which are, in reality, a series of parallel east-west chains. In between these mountains, dry riverbeds called wadis zigzag over the arid surface. The heavy rains that fell on this area during the pluvial period some 2 million years ago carved out these wadis. In the distant past, the climate of this region was wetter and looked much like the savanna of Central Africa today. It began to dry out at about the same time that the pharaonic civilization dawned in the Nile Valley. Today, the Red Sea Mountains receive only sporadic but torrential rainfall. It varies from year to year and seldom lasts more than 2 hours. The rain creates deadly floods that are channeled through the wadis and drain the mountains. The water gushes either westward into the River Nile or eastward into the Red Sea. When these flash floods occur, they transform the dry basins into brimming pools. The gushing water cleans out the dead vegetation and fills the wadis with green seedlings that quickly spring to life. Some rainwater is stored for future use. This is a dike in the Eastern Desert. It sometimes blocks the water in the wadis and forms natural dams. The main source of fresh water in the Eastern Desert comes from the relatively shallow 8 to 10 metre wells which are dug in the wadi beds. Wadi El Gemal, the wadi you are visiting today, is 60 kilometres long, making it the third largest wadi in the eastern desert draining into the Red Sea. It became a national park in 2003 because of its unique biodiversity and its spectacular vegetation and wildlife. It's home to the Dorcas gazelle, ibex, and an array of birds. Reptiles. And insects. It is admired for its varied habitats of mountains and valleys, and also includes an exceptional offshore island. To understand more about the formation of mountains, rocks and fossils, geologists examine them to investigate natural events that took place millions of years ago. When looking at a cross-section of a mountain, each layer of rock represents a period of time in Earth's history. The deepest layers of rock represent the earliest periods of history. To the ordinary person, there are many kinds of rocks, but in reality, there are only three main types of rock formations: the igneous, sedimentary, and metamorphic. Magma under the Earth's surface or lava above it cool and solidify, becoming igneous rock, also known as fire rock. Granite is a form of igneous rock. For millions of years, the surface of our Earth has been eroded by wind and water. The eroded particles build up and under intense pressure form sedimentary rock. Limestone, sandstone and shale are different kinds of sedimentary rock. When extreme pressure and heat are applied to rock, this rock can change its composition. Metamorphic rock has been exposed to such conditions and has changed over time from other types of rocks. Different kinds of metamorphic rocks include white marble, morphed from limestone, and quartzite, morphed from sandstone. Wadi El Gemal is full of all three major types of rock formations. All rocks are minerals, but not all minerals are rocks. A mineral is any substance that cannot be classified as a living organism in origin. Metal ores like gold and silver, crystalline substances like salts and quartz, and homogeneous natural substances like water and gas are all minerals. A fossil is any trace of an animal or plant that was once alive. Bones, shells, tree trunks, footprints, pollen, and tiny organisms can all become fossils. Scientists suggest that the Earth has existed for over 4 billion years. In order to study such a staggering length of time, scientists have divided these 4 billion years into different eons, eras, periods, and epochs. We live in the most recent, or Cenozoic era. This era began around the period that dinosaurs became extinct, approximately 65 million years ago. The Cenozoic era witnessed several major changes to the Earth. First, a period of warming, followed by a rapid and fierce cooling, known as the Ice Age, and then the birth of modern man, which took place around 1 million years ago. Man's survival on Earth depends on his ingenuity in using the available resources. human beings are part of an ecosystem that consists of all living creatures and minerals in mutual interaction. The Earth is the largest ecosystem of all and is called a biosphere. Coral reefs are some of the most productive ecosystems on the planet. They are the largest natural structures we know of and consist of thousands of organisms coexisting in complex, interconnected food chains. The wadis of the Eastern Desert have very delicately balanced ecosystems. The hyper-arid environment affects the life of all its creatures who depend on each other for survival. The climatic change throughout the region forced plants and animals to adapt to the blistering heat. Those that did not simply died out. The species that survive in our Eastern Desert have been most resilient and adaptable to today's austere conditions. The desert flora are either ephemerals, meaning they appear when it rains and disappear during times of drought, or perennials, meaning they endure drought by maximizing water absorption and minimizing water loss through an extensive root system that extracts water from the relatively dry soil. Perennials also shed their leaves and branches during periods of drought until more water becomes available, like the arak and the Acacia tortilis. Desert fauna also have their way of adapting to the scorching weather. Dorcas gazelles eat the roots of trees which usually contain the most water and hide in the shade to avoid direct sun. Camels can live for up to 5 days without drinking, even during the summer months. They also reduce water loss by adjusting their body temperature from day to night. Camels do not pant and do not breathe through their mouths to avoid water loss. A camel stores fat in its hump that produces water in times of need. A camel's ears are hairy and its eyes have a double row of long eyelashes to protect it from the desert sands. Its slit-like nostrils keep sand from entering its lungs. A camel can quench its thirst by drinking bitter water without damaging its kidneys. The proportion of water in camel's milk can be as high as 90%, which helps preserve the life of young camels in extremely arid areas. Its feet are reinforced with broad, callous, elastic pads that spread, allowing the creature to move effortlessly over the softest kinds of sand, just like snowshoes help people move easily over soft snow. A caravan of fully loaded camels can walk up to 60 kilometers a day. Even the fanciest off-road vehicles cannot compete with camels in rough and rugged desert terrain. For all these reasons, the camel has been aptly called the ship of the desert. Throughout the Eastern Desert, one can see prehistoric remains and rock art dating back to early man. Early human beings have passed through several phases of cultural and economic development, beginning with the simplest of all, a nomadic existence. Anthropologists have classified several phases of nomadic existence, starting from hunter-gatherers, who were usually organized in small, isolated groups that moved around a particular region, to pastoral nomadism, whereby people developed domesticated livestock and migrated throughout their territory to find pasture land for their animals. The African people of this region are called Hamites. They are of Caucasoid descent and live in the Horn of Africa, mainly Somalia and Ethiopia, the Western Sahara, and parts of Algeria and Tunisia. It is believed that climate change leading to drought conditions forced the Hamites to wander along the western coast of the Red Sea to the north, entering the Nile Valley and the heart of the Great Sahara, which was still savanna land in those days. As the desiccation advanced, the Hamites left the barrenness of the Great Sahara. Some settled in the Atlas Mountains in today's Algeria, and others backtracked to the Nile Valley. During these long and arduous migrations, some groups of Hamites stayed behind along the Red Sea coast. These are probably the Blemis, mentioned by Greek and Roman historians. Today, they are known as the Beja tribes, and include the Ababda tribesmen living in Wadi El Gemal. If we link anthropology and biblical history, it's possible that the Beja are the ancient Hamitic Cushites, descendants of Noah's grandson Cush, son of Ham. They have been in this region since well before the birth of Jesus Christ. They include the Bisharin, the Ababda, Hadindoa, and Beni Amma tribes, who speak different dialects of an ancient language called Tibdawi. The typical Beja person is delicately built, with reddish-brown skin, a narrow nose and thin lips. The renowned anthropologist Seligman studied their physical measurements and proved that they present a most striking resemblance to the pre-dynastic Egyptians. Historically, there was significant Beja contact with the people of the Nile Valley. They served the ancient Egyptians as caravaneers, police, and professional soldiers. They were also designated to secure desert routes to the mines, quarries, and port facilities of the Red Sea. They also controlled trade and operated the emerald mines. Since then, the Beja tribes have witnessed the rise and fall of the ancient Egyptians, Greeks, Romans, and Ottoman Turks who passed through the eastern desert. The Beja were never conquered by any foreign power. They adopted the state religion of Egypt in the pre-Christian era. A few converted to Christianity in the 6th century and were absorbed into Islam in the 13th century by trading contacts with nearby Arab tribes. Because they lived on the very margins of habitable territory, the Beja have maintained almost all of their own traditions and identity for many centuries. This continuity follows from their modest way of life and the harshness of the living conditions to which they have adapted. The Ababda do not live in tents like the Arabs. They build huts called birch out of tree branches and cover them with matting made from dom palm fiber. They live mainly on milk and durra, or millet, and ceremonially drink Gabana coffee several times a day. They are very superstitious and care little for material belongings. They have a deep respect for nature, are self-sufficient, hospitable, and maintain intense tribal solidarity. Over the centuries, the Ababda have found new sources of income generation. They make charcoal from the acacia trees, gather wood, and trade products in the nearby towns. The ancient Egyptians too depended a great deal on the resources of the eastern desert. They used to send expeditions of thousands of men to extract desert minerals such as semi-precious stones, emeralds, and gold. The ancient mines and temples, found in Wadi Sekit and Nugrus, stand as evidence of extensive mining activities from Pharaonic to Roman time. The ancient boats that traded with southern Africa and Asia departed from ports on the Red Sea in the vicinity of Qusir. Their return journey was always difficult because they had to fight the prevailing northern winds once they passed the Tropic of Cancer. Ptolemy II founded a port about 200 miles south of Qusir and named it after his mother, Berenice. Because it was so far south, it saved more than 1 month of dangerous sailing up the Red Sea, even though it took an extra 2 weeks to carry the goods to the Nile Valley by caravan. The caravan route, linking Berenice to Kift on the Nile, passed through Wadi El Gemal. One can still see the remains of some of the most famous forts and watering stations that served the trade route at the time. The ancient ports of the Red Sea fell into disuse when the Arab tribes conquered Egypt, though a few were retained briefly to transport Muslim pilgrims across the Red Sea to Mecca. Nomadism has declined in the 20th century for economic and political reasons that view nomadism as incompatible with modern life. A culture endangered and even close to extinction, we think pastoral nomadism should be preserved. It is living proof of how humans can coexist in harmony with Mother Nature. We hope this presentation has given you a better understanding of the area surrounding the Eastern Desert and Wadi El Gemal National Park. We now invite you to see and experience it for yourself.